Night of the Hargrove Real Estate Gala, Ethan actually texted her to come, not a call. A text, 2 words, be there. Vivian Aldrich read it twice, standing in her kitchen in bare feet, a glass of wine she hadn't touched going warm on the counter. 3 weeks since he'd filed. 3 weeks since she'd come home to find half the closet empty and a sticky note on the coffee maker that said "I'm done," like she was a project he was closing out. And now he wanted her at the gala. His gala. The one she'd helped him plan for 4 years running. She went. She told herself it was because she still had a stake in Hargrove Properties. Technically, on paper, she did. She told herself a lot of things that night. What she didn't tell anyone, not her sister, not her best friend Simone, not a single person in that glittering ballroom, was that 6 days earlier, she had signed the papers that made her the primary silent investor behind Crestline Development Group. The same Crestline Development Group that had spent the last 8 months quietly negotiating to acquire Hargrove Properties outright. The acquisition closed on a Tuesday. Ethan found out about the new ownership on a Friday. He still didn't know who A. Aldrich Holdings was. She kept that information the way she kept most important things, close, quiet, and to herself. Vivian was 37 years old and she had spent 11 of those years making herself smaller. Not all at once. That was never how it happened. It started the way it always did. Small adjustments. She stopped mentioning the consulting work she did on weekends because Ethan said it made her seem unavailable. She turned down a partnership offer from her firm's Chicago office because they had just bought the house and it wasn't the right time. She let her name come off the Hargrove Properties LLC filing because Ethan said it was cleaner, more professional, less confusing for clients. "You're the face of our home," he told her once early on, and she had actually felt proud of that. She had been 28 and in love, and she thought he meant it as a compliment. By the time she was 35, she understood what it actually meant. It meant she was decoration. It meant she was available. It meant she was the one who rescheduled her client calls when his meetings ran long, the one who handled the catering and the invitations and the thank you notes while he shook hands and took credit. It meant that when his assistant Dana, sharp-edged, 26, with the particular kind of confidence that comes from never having been told to make yourself smaller, started spending late evenings at the office, Vivian noticed but said nothing. Because she had trained herself not to make a scene. She noticed the way Ethan's voice changed when he talked about work now. She noticed the new cologne. She noticed that he'd stopped coming to bed until after she was asleep. She noticed everything. She just didn't say it. What she did instead, quietly, carefully, over the course of 2 years, was rebuild. She went back to her firm part-time when Ethan was traveling. She started consulting independently under her own name. She reconnected with her mentor, a woman named Margaret who had built 3 commercial real estate portfolios from scratch and had very little patience for women who let their husbands define their net worth. Margaret introduced her to the right people. The right people introduced her to Crestline. Vivian put in her first investment at a level Ethan never knew about, then a second, then a third. She was not reckless. She was not impulsive. She was methodical in the way that only people who have been dismissed for a very long time can be, quietly, steadily, with absolute precision. By the time Ethan handed her divorce papers across the kitchen island with the energy of a man signing off on a mildly inconvenient lease renewal, Vivian Aldrich was worth more than she had ever let him see. And Crestline Development Group was 3 months away from closing the deal that would hand her controlling interest in everything he had built. She signed the divorce papers on a Wednesday. She signed the Crestline acquisition documents the following Tuesday. She did not cry either time. The gala was held at the Meridian Hotel, one of those downtown spaces with floor-to-ceiling windows and ambient lighting engineered to make everyone look successful. Vivian had found the venue, had negotiated the rate, had personally approved the floral arrangements that now sat in arrangements she recognized on every table. Ethan didn't mention any of that when he saw her walk in. He was standing near the bar with Dana, who had her hand on his arm in a way that had stopped being ambiguous approximately 4 months ago. He looked up when Vivian entered. Something moved across his face, surprise maybe, or the particular discomfort of a man who had not expected his ex-wife to look like that. She had worn the dark green dress, the one she'd bought 2 years ago and never had occasion for. It fit the way expensive things fit when you have finally, after a long time, stopped shrinking. "You came," he said, crossing the room with Dana still watching from the bar. "You asked me to," Vivian said. There was a beat of silence. Ethan had a way of filling silences with implications, with looks that suggested she was overreacting, or misunderstanding, or being difficult. She had spent years learning to read that silence and adjust herself accordingly. She didn't adjust this time. "I thought we could be civil," he said, "professionally." "We can be," she said, and smiled and moved past him toward the table where Margaret was already seated with two of the Crestline board members, neither of whom acknowledged Vivienne with anything more than a small, careful nod. Later, she would learn that Ethan had noticed that nod, had wondered about it, had told his business partner Garrett something about it over drinks after the event. "She knows those guys from Crestline," Garrett had said apparently. "How does Vivienne know those guys from Crestline?" Ethan had shrugged it off. He was good at shrugging things off. The meeting was scheduled for the following Monday at 9. Hargrove Properties' executive team would be meeting their new ownership group for the first time. Ethan had spent the weekend preparing his presentations, his projections, his 5-year plan. He told Garrett he was looking forward to it, that new investment meant new opportunities, that this was the beginning of something. Vivienne arrived at the Hargrove Properties conference room at 8:52. She was not wearing the green dress this time. She was wearing a charcoal blazer and a composure she had spent 2 years building, and she sat down at the head of the table the way she had practiced, not dramatically, not with any theatrics, simply as a person who belonged there. Ethan walked in at 8:59. She watched the exact moment it happened, the way his gaze moved across the room and landed on her face and stayed there, the way the folder he was carrying dropped maybe 2 inches before he caught it, the way his mouth opened slightly and then closed. "Good morning," she said. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Around them, assistants were setting out water glasses, someone's phone buzzed. The normalcy of it was almost surreal. "Vivienne." His voice was careful in the way voices get when the brain hasn't fully processed something yet. "What are you?" "I represent A. Aldrich Holdings," she said, "primary investor in Crestline Development Group. I believe you received the ownership documentation last Friday?" She watched him understand it. Not all at once. In pieces. The way things came apart always happened in pieces. First the fact of her presence, then the name, then the acquisition documents he'd received and not looked at closely enough. Then the gala, then the nod from the Crestline board members, then everything else he hadn't paid enough attention to. Garrett, sitting to Ethan's left, looked between them with the specific expression of a man watching a situation develop that he does not understand and desperately wishes he did. "You bought the company," Ethan said. "It came out flat." "Crestline acquired Hargrove Properties," Vivienne said. "Yes. You knew." "At the gala, I've known for several months." He sat down. She was not sure if he decided to or if his legs simply made the decision for him. The weeks that followed were not traumatic. That was the thing people always expected. The explosion, the confrontation, the moment where everything became a scene. Vivienne had no interest in scenes. She'd spent 11 years in a marriage that required her to manage everyone else's emotional temperature, and she was finished with that particular job. She ran the Monday meetings. She reviewed the financial reports. She asked Marcus, the CFO who had been with Hargrove Properties for 7 years and clearly knew where every body was buried, to walk her through the company's accounting irregularities, because there were accounting irregularities, several of them, in the kind of places that suggested someone had been very confident no one would ever look closely. Someone had, in fact, not been looking closely. "For several years, I want a full audit," she told Marcus on their third meeting. "Independent, external, complete. I want to know everything." Marcus looked at her with the expression of a man who had been waiting for someone to say exactly that for quite some time. "I'll have it started by end of week." Ethan's position at the company was retained, technically. Vivienne was not interested in cruelty. She was interested in accuracy, in things being what they actually were, rather than what convenient fictions had made them appear to be. His title shifted. His decision-making authority was restructured. He reported now to a management team that Vivienne had brought in from Crestline, people who had not spent years deferring to him and who had no reason to start. Dana left voluntarily within the first 2 weeks. Vivienne heard about it from Margaret, who heard it from someone else, and she received the information the same way she received most things now, noted it, filed it, moved on. The call from Ethan's mother came on a Thursday afternoon. Vivienne was at her desk reviewing lease agreements when Rachel's name came up on her phone. She looked at it for a moment. She answered. "I don't understand how you can do this," Rachel said before hello. She had always been the kind of woman who got to the point. "Do what?" Vivienne asked, genuinely curious which part Rachel had decided to make her fault. Humiliate him like this, in front of his colleagues, his entire team. "I attended a business meeting," Vivienne said. as a representative of the company's new ownership group. You did it on purpose. I built something, Rachel. I invested in something. The acquisition was finalized before the divorce was. I didn't arrange the timeline to make a point. That's just how the timeline went. A pause. Then, he's your husband. He was, Vivian said. He made a different choice. I believe you supported that choice. Another pause. Longer this time. Vivian remembered the Mother's Day brunch 2 years ago, when Rachel had quietly mentioned to Ethan that Dana was very capable, very driven, with a specific quality of admiration that had made Vivian's chest go tight. She remembered the Christmas gathering where Rachel had squeezed Vivian's hand and said she hoped things would work themselves out, in the tone of a woman who had already decided they wouldn't. She remembered every small withdrawal of warmth, every slight repositioning, every careful distance that said, "We have already chosen, and it isn't you." "I hope Ethan finds what he's looking for," Vivian said. "I genuinely do. But I'm not going to apologize for where I am. I worked for this." She ended the call. She sat for a moment in the quiet of her office, her hands still on the phone. Outside the window, the city continued doing what it always did, indifferent, busy, enormous. She had a 2 o'clock with the audit team. She had a lease review to finish. She had a dinner with Simone on Friday that she was actually looking forward to for the first time in a while. She had, she realized, quite a lot to do. Simone asked her about it over dinner. Simone had the particular gift of asking questions that sounded casual and weren't. "Do you feel like you did it to get back at him?" she asked, refilling her wine without looking up. Vivian thought about it honestly, the way she was trying to do with things now, without the old habit of managing her own feelings into something more acceptable. "I don't think so," she said. "I started investing in Crestline because it was a good investment and because Margaret believed in it and because I had spent 2 years watching my own money sit in a joint account that I never had full access to. I was afraid for a long time of what would happen if I actually started building something for myself. Like it would break something in the marriage, like it was taking something from him." She picked up her glass. "And then I realized the marriage was already broken, and the only thing I was taking from was myself." Simone looked at her. "And now I own a controlling interest in a real estate company," Vivian said, "and I have a 2 o'clock on Mondays that I actually look forward to." Simone laughed. It was the real kind, not the polite kind. The audit turned up more than anyone had expected. Not criminal, or not entirely, but significant enough that several board decisions from the previous 3 years required restructuring, and 2 contracts that had been awarded to vendors Garrett had personal relationships with were voided and rebid. Garrett resigned before he was asked to. Ethan stayed, though the nature of his staying changed month by month in ways that seemed to deflate him in increments. She did not feel satisfied watching it happen. Exactly. Satisfaction wasn't quite the right word. It was more like accuracy, like watching a blurry image come into focus, like things being correctly labeled at last. She had not set out to take anything from him. She had set out to take back what was hers. The difference, she was learning, was enormous. In April, 7 months after the acquisition closed, Vivian sat in on the quarterly board meeting, as she always did now, at the head of the table, with Marcus on her left and the Crestline team on her right. Ethan was 3 seats down. He presented his section of the report efficiently and professionally, and she listened and asked 2 questions and thanked him for the update. After the meeting, as people were filing out, he stopped beside her. "You were always smarter than I let myself see," he said. She looked at him. He was not asking for anything. She could tell the difference now between a man making an admission and a man looking for absolution. This was an admission. It was the most honest thing he had said to her in years. "I know," she said. She meant it without cruelty. She meant it as a simple statement of fact, the kind she should have been making for a long time. He nodded once and walked out. She stayed where she was for a moment, her hand resting on the back of the chair that had been hers for 7 months now. The room was emptying. People were already moving on to the next thing on their calendars. The city sat bright and enormous outside the windows. She had a call with the Chicago office at 3. She had a site visit tomorrow morning for a new development Crestline was considering, a mixed-use property on the east side that she thought had real potential, the kind of project she would have been talked out of caring about once. She gathered her notes. She walked out of the room the way she had learned to do everything now, like someone who had somewhere to be, something to build and no reason left in the world to make herself small.